I wish to speak out here to my father and mother and sister and aunt, who will likely never hear my words and who have cut off all contact with me because of my critique of Israel's actions and my defense of human rights and the rights of Palestinians to live their lives in dignity, to be seen as human beings with equal worth as those of Israeli Jews, and to be recognized as having the rights to their lands from which they have been dispossessed and have been subjected to such sustained oppression and apartheid policies over the decades. I wish to speak out now as the genocidal actions against the Palestinians in Gaza have reached such an elevated level of cruelty and horror that no words can even begin to describe anymore what is taking place there. I wish too to speak out to my family, friends and acquaintances who are blindly adhering to Zionism, who feel that Israel, no matter what it does or how much horror and suffering and annihilation it causes in order to obtain its ideological settler-colonial goals of Lebensraum, of land acquisition through the disappearance of the indigenous population by ethnic cleansing and genocide, no matter what unconscionable actions Israel performs, it must be blindly supported at all costs. Their belief that any critique of the Zionist entity must be avoided. Their attempts and methods of trying to silence me and others around them who speak out against Israel's crimes. They're accusing us of using anti-Semitic tropes or simply cutting us off so that they can avoid any exposure to such antithetical views that might offend their sensibilities. Whilst Israel continues to slaughter and maim hundreds of innocent children, women and men on a daily basis. And whilst so many others continue to die of forced starvation, malnutrition, illness, disease, festering wounds and lack of medical care. I wish to address these words to those around me who still believe unquestioningly the Israeli propaganda, that babies were beheaded by Hamas on October the 7th, that they were cooked in ovens, that they were hung up on washing lines, that women were systemically raped or cut into pieces and their breasts used as footballs. I wish to address these words too to those who refuse to accept the irrefutable evidence that so many hundreds of Israeli civilians killed on October the 7th were killed not by Hamas but by the Israeli military as part of the Hannibal doctrine. I speak also to all of you for whom it is so much more convenient to adhere to Israel's fabrications so that you can continue to blindly and unquestioningly follow its unconscionable behaviour in the belief that it is inseparable from your Judaism, in the belief that your very existence depends on it. Even though the above claims have been extensively and painstakingly debunked by credible investigative journalists, you prefer to adhere to the Israel's Asbara, which has been craftily weaponized for the world in order to justify its genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza from the outset, and its accelerated ethnic cleansing and annexation of the West Bank, while stymieing any and all criticism against it throughout this apocalyptic and sustained abomination of unmitigated evil. I wish too to address these words to those so-called liberals in my entourage who somehow believe that there is an equivalence between Israel's genocidal actions and those scattered acts of resistance by Palestinians, an oppressed and downtrodden nation, dispossessed of their lands and dignity, and with every right to resist and rise up against an apartheid, ethnosupremacist state that has been oppressing them and denying them of their basic human rights and of their lands for over 75 years. And I address these words too to friends and colleagues and associates who pride themselves on their deep humanity and compassion, but who have conveniently chosen to close their eyes to the unspeakable horrors that are being perpetrated on a daily basis by Israel, who prefer to remain in a blissful state of silence and ignorance because it's too painful to contemplate. It's too difficult to watch. It's too uncomfortable to apprehend. Because it's so much more convenient to just get on with the quotidian of your lives, rather than to confront the heinous crimes that Israel is committing in your name and in the name of so many others around you. You just bury your heads in the sand in silence and believe that by doing so your humanity can thus remain intact and unblemished. Out of sight, out of mind is your philosophy, and you remain comfortable in yourselves with such a stance. I ask all of you, as you continue to show such deep compassion for your pet dogs and pet cats, as you continue to embrace your loved ones and show your unquestioned support, compassion and sorrow for those Israeli citizens and soldiers caught up in the violent events of October the 7th. Where is your compassion for the Palestinian children of Gaza, almost 20,000 of whom have been annihilated by Israeli bombs, artillery, and the careful and deliberate aim of Israeli snipers? Almost 40,000 of whom have been orphaned. The thousands upon thousands of whom have lost limbs and been operated upon without anaesthetics. And the more than 90% of infants who are now suffering from acute malnutrition and face imminent death from starvation. Dear God, what kind of beings have you become when a snuff movie of apocalyptic proportions is playing out before your eyes, and you are silent at best and openly complicit at worst before such momentous atrocities, before such momentous suffering, before such unmitigated evil? You continue to support and or show complicity for a terrorist state that is flagrantly ignoring every rule of law, every iota of human rights, that is committing the worst crimes against humanity on a daily basis, and whose public figures, members of parliament and ministers are openly and unashamedly dehumanizing the Palestinians at every opportunity, and so justifying the need to starve them to death, annihilate them, and disappear them from their lands, whilst comparing them to animals, vermin, and cockroaches. In this light, I wish to translate a post from an Israeli medical doctor, Dr. Amos Tzabor, who posted on social media yesterday in excitement of being called up as part of the reserves to take part in Operation Gidon, which is the final solution, the occupation of the whole of Gaza and the herding of the entire population, including the injured, ill, diseased and bedridden, to the south of Gaza in anticipation of their disappearance from the land, a disappearance that has been in the making since the very inception of Zionism. Dr. Tzabor states as follows: I am excited to be entering Gaza today. I pray that we exterminate Hamas as a terror organization. Yesterday, guys from the unit exterminated dozens of terrorists. I made a request to take part in the extermination campaign as a doctor in the framework of preventative medicine. One of the paramedics corrected me and said, it's within the framework of public health. On second thoughts, he's right, because after all, we're talking about the extermination of cockroaches and other repulsive creatures. The views of this doctor, going off to fight and exterminate as many cockroaches as possible, is representative, unfortunately, of so many of the Israeli public at large today, raised and conditioned under the egregious ideology of Zionism, which teaches them that they are a superior ethnic race and that the indigenous Palestinians who inhabited the vast majority of the land before their arrival from Europe as colonial settlers are inferior beings, less than human, whose lives are of little or no worth. A mindset shared with colonial settlers from throughout the ages. These are the people who are fighting in Gaza today with tanks and artillery and sniper fire and drones and aerial bombers. Those who dismiss the likes of Dr. Amos Tzabor as a fringe extremist group, in order for their consciences to remain unruffled and for them to continue supporting the Zionist entity without any qualms, are once again willfully denying and ignoring the very reality before their eyes. Dr. Tzabo is representative of the ideas the Zionists at large hold of Palestinians. Certainly, my sister, who lives in Israel and considers herself a liberal Zionist, has no less an opinion of Palestinians and their worth. My parents, who live in the UK but are also ardent Zionists, have no less a dehumanized view of Palestinians. Today I came across an article in Haaretz Israeli newspaper entitled "Destroying Gaza with Love, Israel's New Yogi Nazis." It talks about a whole generation of spiritual humanists in Israel today with a deep and declared love for humanity who see no contradiction in advocating the extermination of the population of the Gazans. In the article, a Rivka Lafer is described as a yoga teacher and a facilitator of workshops for personal development. As well as expounding upon her work in the help and development of those around her, she says proudly, "We are committed to take revenge and destroy Gaza, from infant to old woman." The article also mentions a known stand-up comedian and satirist, Gil Kopatz, who also defines himself as a spiritual person. On the eve of the Holocaust Remembrance Day, he wrote on social media, "If you feed sharks, they eventually eat you. If you feed Gazans, they eventually eat you. I support making sharks extinct and exterminating Gazans." Reflections for Holocaust Remembrance Day 2025. Another woman from the Tel Aviv area who runs a studio facilitating groups for spiritual development and creativity is interviewed in the article. She refers to a video that she received showing an emaciated, starving child in Gaza with, "Not credible. Sorry, I've seen how clips are staged. Positioning, applying makeup, putting together a script." You know what? Even if it is real, after October the 7th, I don't have an ounce of compassion for anyone there, not even for children. It saddens me to see people among us actually sharing this shit, and worse, identifying with it and expressing pain. She goes on to say, "I'm a mother, a lover of humanity, and an all-round great person." This reminds me of a dialogue I had with my sister towards the beginning of the genocidal onslaught on Gaza. I sent her a photo of a Gazan mother holding the remains of her limp baby, one of many who had been slaughtered that day by Israeli fire. My sister's response was immediate and categorical. "It's fake news," she wrote back to me from her comfortable bourgeois residence by the sea, north of Tel Aviv. "She's holding a rag doll that was bought from Toys R Us. That's not a real baby. It's all fake. Please refrain from sending me such things in the future." She promptly forwarded my post on to my father so that they could both concur on what an extremist and anti-Semite I had turned into through my having shown compassion for Palestinian lives and my critique of Israel's genocidal onslaught and indiscriminate mass killing of largely children, women, the elderly, and clearly innocent men. The truth is that it's incomprehensible to me, and to so many like-minded people around me, how so many Jews have allowed themselves to be blinded to the reality and have allowed the pernicious ideology of Zionism to define them and destroy their moral compass. It is incomprehensible to me how a people who rose again out of the ashes of the Holocaust, one of the greatest evils in our history, where they were vilified and dehumanized by the Nazis so entirely that their mass extermination could be performed without any conscience, without any sense of guilt, and with a will and alacrity that is astonishing. How such a people have allowed themselves to fall under the pernicious ideology of Zionism so that they too can think in a similar mindset to the Nazis and consider now the Palestinians as no more than cockroaches that need to be exterminated en masse. Judaism, the historical bedrock of morality in our world, has been hijacked and manipulated by the egregious political ideology of Zionism, distorting it into a chimera for the support of hate, ethnosupremacism, oppression, and mass extermination. That is why it is so vitally important for Jews to speak out today more than ever, to shout out and declare that this is not in their name, that this is not in our name. And more Jews, particularly young Jews who have spent less of their lives indoctrinated and manipulated by Zionist rhetoric, are speaking out and dissociating themselves from Zionism and saying that this genocide and this supremacist settler-colonial ideology and mindset that has implemented a policy of apartheid and oppression of the other for so many decades have nothing to do with the values of Judaism that they hold dear. It seems apt for me to end, not with my words, but with the words of Palestinians from Gaza, who express from the depths of their torn beings the daily excruciating horrors and terrors that they are experiencing under Israel's heinous and unrelenting genocidal onslaught that all our leaders are complicit in. These words were written yesterday by a Facebook friend in Gaza who I am in contact with, called Reham Khaled. As the ground invasion swept through Jabalia for the fourth time, we faced the decision whether to evacuate, as we were on the outskirts of the camp, far from the range of fire. We said we will not leave. For 3 days our home was transformed into a fortress of terror, non-stop explosions, houses crumbling like autumn leaves, and neighbours becoming witnesses, then martyrs, until it was our turn. When the bombs pounded the ceiling of our world, terror trapped us in a single room, believing for a moment that its fragile walls would protect us. We waited for dawn as if we were waiting for a drop of water in the desert, each passing minute like a knife to the heart. When daylight broke, we left. Our salty tears mingled with the sweat of fear, the smell of gunpowder choking our breath, and the sounds of explosions still echoing in our ears. We walked heavily to Saftawi, while my father's heart trembled there, in that room whose walls were drenched in our blood and which witnessed our first steps. Every day, under the hail of fire, he would return to it like a ghost searching for his soul among the rubble, digging with his bloody fingers to extract our memories from beneath the debris. And now, death returns there. But we are strangers. Our home has become a memory, and our laughter that hung in the corners has become ghosts. They uprooted us from our soil like a tree hundreds of years old, without mercy. But how can nostalgia not throb within us? How can we not melt with longing for the stones that knew the warmth of our footsteps, shared our terror, and perhaps even cried with us? Every grain of dust there loved us more than we deserved. And these are the words yesterday from a Facebook friend, Reda Akram, who now, under Israel's Operation Gidon, Israel's final solution for the Palestinian problem, has been displaced yet again with his family, just like Reham Khaled above. I swear to you that death is better than displacement and its fatigue and pain. We slept on the ground, and our cover was the sky, the cold, the lack of bedding, the lack of food since yesterday. I haven't eaten anything. What kind of life is this? These children are hungry. All the money in the world is not worth this day. But in order for us to live and endure, my children and I ask you for help, even if it is a little, in light of the most difficult days of war that we have been through. We are being exterminated. Damn the entire silent world. And I end this with a haunting account from Dr. Az-Din. Last night, about an hour after I wrote my final words, I lay on my bed, suspended between consciousness and torment. Outside, the heavens roared, not with thunder. No, thunder is God's voice. This was man's thunder, explosions like the laughter of devils. The mosquitoes feasted on my skin as if even the smallest creatures had been promised blood tonight. And then, God forgive me, I do not lie, the window burst open above my head. But it was not the wind, no, it was the breath of hell. Fire entered like a thief, licking the walls with its cruel tongue. The stones began to fall, as though the house itself was ashamed to still stand. We screamed, names, prayers, nothingness. My father's voice was among them until it was silenced by the bleeding from his head. I pressed my hands to his wound. I did not cry. I was beyond tears. I trembled not from fear, but from the unbearable fact that I still existed. They say his injury was minor, but what is minor in Gaza? What is small pain in a place built from suffering? Our neighbour's house, 4 meters away, gone, as if it never was. They were asleep. They didn't even have time to sin. 2 children, angels, if such beings still exist, burned. I cannot describe their deaths because nothing remained to describe. 1 body was found, the rest scattered, ash, dust. I tell you, even dust has memory, and the rooftops now carry the memory of screams. We survived, but what is survival? It is not life, it is not grace, it is merely an agreement with death, not tonight. The neighbourhood walks like Cain now, marked, wandering, silent. They do not weep loudly. In Gaza, grief is so common it has forgotten how to raise its voice. But I, God help me, I am not weeping only for them. I am weeping for the world, for the idea of the world. What kind of creation is this, where such things repeat and still men build bombs and governments? I look into the mirror and see not myself, but a witness to the absurdity of mercy and the silence of heaven. I ask no more for justice. I ask, why are we born at all if only to live through this?